Putting buckets or preparing a site, these are the things that need to be done. Alright, so number one, where the buckets are going to stand, one needs to have the bricks where the buckets are going to stand on top of, they need to be absolutely level, dead level, and preferably on a concrete slab or compacted very hard so that they can't subside later on. Because the way that the aeric gravity pulsator works is it relies on levels. And if the levels subside later on, that setup there, if the bucket levels subside, then the water flow rates change. So it's important to get the levels right. So there are 40 buckets in that line, which is a double line, and 20 buckets in this line. Alright, so it's actually 60 buckets standing next to each other here. Then the deepwater beds would look like this. So really just a brickwork framework. I would not advise for the poles to be built into the wall. That I believe is actually not a good plan. But yeah, in this case, because of the positioning of the roof sheets or the roof material, they've been put there. So try and keep the poles away from the brickwork. So at this end, we've got, well, let me start at this end where the water comes from the media beds. It's going to come up to this point. Our plumbing is going to come up and over into the deepwater bed. It's going to go flow right through to the end, and at the end we have an aperture. There's a hole of 30 centimeters right down to the ground, so that we can put our flange in there. Then where the pole is on the far side, so where the pole is over there, that's where our pipe would go, which transfers the water from the one deep water to the other. Alright, also a flange going in that side, and then the water returns, and then our trenching is in this format, so that our return water from the deepwater beds would return underneath the media beds to the fish house area. So the media beds are standing on lintels that are compacted into the ground. So ground is compacted underneath the lintels. Make sure that that is absolutely solid. And then our water return from the deepwater beds goes through the trench. I need some gumboots here. Goes through this trench and back to the sump. Now the sump, obviously, it would be preferable for the sump to be built out with brick, so that you don't get any subsiding soil or anything subsiding or things falling inside. The sump should ideally be just below the level of the ground, or level of the lip of the brickwork that would be around the sump. Fish tanks are positioned on either side of the sump in such a way that the water flowing from the dual sump would go to the fish tanks and then return. So there's a trench which would return the water back in on both sides. And then obviously the fish house itself is enclosed in plastic. So in between the two fish houses, that module over there and this module here, there is space for a wicking bed arrangement. And in this case it's been done really nicely. Wicking bed arrangement would go in this space. Yeah, so we have one deepwater raft, one deepwater bed, and another deepwater bed being supplied by 3 media beds. And then exactly the same on the other side, where we have 3 media beds supplying 2 deepwater beds. And then the water returns, joins into the line, return back to the sump. So that's the configuration and the preparation, site preparation, that we need to have in place. Now in this case, the fish tank area is about 30 centimeters lower than the rest of the system. The media beds and the deepwater beds are on one level, and then 30 centimeters lower on a bit of a terrace, we've then got the fish tanks and the sump, just to facilitate the water movement from the one side back across to the other. Yeah. And then obviously the other thing would be electrical point would be in the center inside the fish house so that it's protected from weather. And yeah, that gives us a good idea of the sort of preparation, soil preparation and trenching that needs to be done prior to installation.